What's up guys, today I want to go over a few problems that I think that Zenless Zone Zero needs to improve on. To be clear, I really like this game. I've been playing it pretty much every day for multiple hours a day. I'm getting towards the end of the content, but I've really enjoyed my time with this game. Having said that, with all the time that I've put in, I have noticed a few things about combat that I want to talk about, and I think that need a little bit of tweaking and improving if this system is going to carry forward and there's going to be potentially more difficult content in the future. Because I think there's a good foundation here for the combat, but I want to make sure that it is as polished as it can be before we get potentially more challenging game modes, different endgame content like they've said in the patch notes. So this is basically my feedback. Let me know if you guys have any issues with the combat system yourselves, if there's a particular enemy that's irking you for some reason. Let me know in the comments. And without further ado, let me show you 3 things that I think Zenless Zone Zero's combat needs to improve on. So the first thing I want to talk about is quick moving or teleporting enemies, because this game has a lock-on feature, but it's not really encouraged to use most of the time, and there's also a sort of auto lock-on feature, like your camera will auto lock on a specific enemy if you start attacking them. And this is a particular issue with the auto lock system. So let me show you what I mean. I got 2 examples. One is a little worse than the other, but let's look at them now. So this is one of the things that I mean. This is a specific enemy. He has a specific teleporting attack, and you'll notice that I'm auto locked on him currently. So I've seen this attack several times at this point, so I know when to dodge it based on the timings. But let me show you what I mean. So he teleports, boom, 1, 2, parry. Now, if you've seen that multiple times, you might just automatically know the timing, but you'll notice that the camera doesn't really follow him when he teleports. So he teleports there, then he teleports there, and right, the camera, I'm adjusting the camera to see this. I'm swiveling it myself. And then he comes out of nowhere from the top, right, from a camera angle that I can't even see, and you have to hit a parry. So when you see this sort of thing for the first time, or the first several times, it can catch you off guard, because you can't actually see the indicator of what you need to be reacting to. So if the auto lock tracked him for each attack, and you saw him appear and attack, you could just react naturally with your dash or whatever, and you could react to the parry. But as it is, if you are not using lock-on, which I haven't for a majority of the game, and I think a lot of people don't use, because a lot of the enemies in this game come in groups, so you don't really want to have like lock on a specific target the whole time. You want to be able to free cam a little bit to make sure you're not missing an attack that's coming your way, or if you need to dodge a projectile or something. It's something that most people will be using regularly. And I think for this specific attack, it doesn't really function particularly well. Right? Ideally, if it's just you and him, and you're auto-locked onto this guy instead of manually locked on, you should be able to see these attacks coming. They shouldn't come from off-screen and then you're tagged by them. Right? Not an undodgeable or anything, but I think this is kind of a shitty design. I think that they need to make the auto-lock track enemies that are moving quickly, or ones that are like teleporting. It shouldn't just auto-lock while they're standing still in one place. Now, I don't think this is a big issue for the smaller, like medium-sized enemies that I pointed out, right? They're not the toughest to begin with, and you can get used to their moves pretty easily. However, I think for bosses, this is going to be very important if they're going to have moves like this one. So watch this guy in the background. You'll see he raises up, and then he's about to come flying down. Boom. Now if you happen to not have the other ballerina on your screen, or you're focused attacking the other one, you may not even see this attack coming to dodge it. So the issue with this is you don't want to manual lock on these guys, because you need to keep them both in view the whole time. So if you lock onto one of them, you may not be able to easily see where the other one is, which is a problem, right? I mean, that's fine. If the game wants you to free cam this boss fight to keep an eye on both ballerinas at the same time, that's not a big deal. The issue is that if you are using just the auto lock, you're not manually locking on, an attack like that may not be visible to you. right? Especially if they hover up, like, off screen or something. There's a high likelihood that unless you are very focused on keeping both of them in your frame, you may not see that attack coming, and it might catch you off guard and you will have no time to react to it. So if we're going to have attacks like this, where we're fighting one, and a bunch of particle effects are happening here, and then in the background one dives up, you know, luckily this time it was on screen, and then quickly, boom, hits you. I think we need something that's going to track that with the camera, with our auto lock. I don't think the player needs to be asked to keep track of that while there's so much happening in the foreground already. If you're going to have an attack like that, the camera needs to track it. I need to know what I'm fighting and reacting to. I shouldn't just suddenly get pinned by something that came out of the sky. Alright, you can learn this. It's just, if you are not very focused on keeping track of both of them, and you watch, and even if you're fighting or you're parrying the other ballerina and the other one floats up, you need to know that that's happening. I'd rather them just show this attack. Have the camera like pan out slightly maybe, so that the player can know when this attack is coming. They'll see them rise up in the distance in their peripheral vision, and it won't happen off screen, and then once they come down they can react. Because another thing about this move is that there's no light tell. It's just something you have to see and then react to. So you just need to see this animation, which a lot of people aren't going to be conditioned to at this point in the game. So watch this one more time. I'm focused on parrying this one ballerina. They float up. There's a slight blink, but it's not a blink to parry or a red blink either. It's just a blink that these guys use to tell you, oh, you better dodge. So what I'm trying to say is basically this fight requires you to not lock on to a specific enemy because you need to be free camming. Because of that, a lot of the time this particular attack can float out of your field of view if you're paying attention to the other ballerina, and it doesn't have a flash or indicator, so when you get hit by it, it can feel kind of unfair. So I think if they're going to continue to do stuff like the teleport, like this, I think we should be adjusting the camera to make sure that this sort of stuff is in the field of view of the player so they can more naturally react to it. I don't think I should be fighting the camera, I should be fighting the enemy, right? Okay, so another thing that I think needs to happen, this is number 2. We need to do away with these guys. These scrub mobs that have like 1 or 2 attacks. You'll see this guy literally just sends out a projectile every once in a while. These guys are not exciting to fight. They have a single... here's another one coming up here. These guys have a singular thing that defeats them, and that is literally just hitting them. You never have to worry about it. If they have a parry, you can parry it. This guy has like 3 different moves, but every single one has a parry, which you'll just parry and then immediately chain attack to get your parry stack back. And my main issue is that these enemies, the solution every time is just to start hitting them. Once you hit them, they are stunned, they can't do anything to you. And then you repeat the exact same formula to kill them that you do with every other one. For me, this is Ambi 1, 2, 3 into E, and then Soldier 11 chain attack, and that pretty much one-shots every single one of them. And this is just really boring, and unfortunately these scrub enemies make up a majority of this game, so I think in the future we need to do away with just having big groups of these guys where you just do the exact same thing 6 times over and don't get hit. And I think we need to put more development time instead of designing these guys out, giving them 1 or 2 moves. Right? It's a waste of time, because the solution is the same. Even if they have multiple moves, you just walk up and start hitting them. There's nothing you need to worry about from these enemies ever. So why invest dev resources in these guys when we could just make more medium-sized guys? These guys have more moves, right? I haven't fought this guy like properly before, so I got caught out by that. I mean, I'm just trying to dodge, I'm not parrying. Obviously, some of these guys you can literally just parry everything they do. But theoretically, if the content was harder, and we were having to fight these guys more than like 5 seconds at a time, like in the story, if you come up against this guy, you're going to need to know how to dodge these attacks because you probably will run out of parries. So if we get more things like this, I like these attacks more, right? That's another one. You can't just dodge in one direction. He catches you if you do that. So there's more variety in these attacks. I think the designs in general are more interesting too, and you just have to think about more when you're fighting these enemies. They're not crazy complicated. If you want to make them easy in the story, you can just throw them in. But if you want to introduce enemies like this into harder content, they can work, right? If you want an enemy that is tougher and does these moves, they're at least somewhat interesting, right? There's only like 4 of them, but at least that's better than 1. So that's my main thing here. I think dev time is wasted on the smaller enemies, and I think they make the game in general more boring, because it's just the same thing, the same cycle. So if we did away with them and introduced more interesting enemy types, we introduced more of these like medium-sized mobs and introduced more bosses that have at least a couple moves that you have to worry about or think about, right? This guy has the hit, bob, weave, hit again. If you're not ready for that the first time you see it, you might get hit by it. Or the hit, jump, hit, right? You gotta know to parry those things. Or if you're out of parry, you would need to recognize that most of his stuff is 2-hit. These enemies at least have some thought put into them, and they don't all have the same solution to get around them, right? And this is obviously assuming that they're not like as easy as they are in like the story. Because you'll notice in the harder content in this game that you run out of parries pretty quickly, because the enemies take a lot longer to stun, and since they have a higher stun pool, then you have to start conserving your parries for certain attacks, and you'll have to dodge a lot of the other ones. So assuming these enemies are put into something like that, they'll at least be more interesting than the scrub mobs that you just smack until they die. Anyway, that's point 2. Less scrubs, more dev time put towards medium-sized enemies. Let's talk about my last thing for this video. So this one is going to be about telegraphing. I think the telegraphing in general in this game is pretty good. You can usually tell when an enemy is doing certain things, but specifically I want to talk about this Pounder guy. He's in Shiyu Defense at level 10, and I'm pretty under-leveled for this at the moment, so I have to pretty much learn every move that he has, and doing that has kind of shown me a bit of a flaw in his design, which makes me a little concerned for some of the other enemies. But just so you know, it's not that I'm bad, right? I've beat this guy. Right, this is not about skill issue, this is about I don't think some of his moves are telegraphed in the best way. So let's look at a good telegraphed move. This is his leg raise. Right, he lifts it up, slams it back down. I unfortunately did my EX special right before he decided to do this, so I got caught anyway, which is a bit annoying. But you'll see, yeah, and then he lifts it up again, and there's a parry indicator, and even if you're just trying to dodge this move, you see him lift the right leg up. Oh, I need a dodge, right? This is an example of good telegraphing. The issue I have with this boss is he has about 3 moves that do this, right? He'll raise up, a big red thing will come on the ground, and then he'll slam down. Now coming into this fight, you would think that this is just one move, right? Because previously when you fought him, you probably just parry this every time, so it feels the same. But once you start having to dodge this move, you'll notice that there are 3 different variations of it. There's that one, which is just a normal slam, right? That one's easy to dodge, you just time when he goes down. Right, so here's the single slam. That's that one there. He also has this one, where he raises up really high and then does 1, 2, 3 hits outwards. This one I think you may have to parry. I think maybe if you dodge inwards it might work too, but if you dodge the first hit you often get hit by the second 2 afterwards, and they do big chunks of damage. Right, you'll see that I get hit by the full thing here, and at 1, 2, 3 my ambi's dead. And the key thing here is you'll notice that the startup animation, right, this is the telegraph, is when he does this thing. He lifts up and this thing drops down. Now, if you're like me, you're staring at the leg, not him, because the leg is often where the attacks come from. And also, you're kind of conditioned, since you can parry all these, to kind of treat them the same. So in the first several runs, you'll feel like, wait, what the heck? He just did the same move, but he hit me. So I think this move, that there are slight animation differences, right? The first one, it raises up and then comes down. This one, it raises up and this thing drops down, and then it does a 3 hit, boom, 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 outwards in a much bigger radius. There's slight differences, but I don't think it's enough to... But I think it needs to be a little bit more clear what the difference between these are, because at the end of the day, this guy is still lifting up and slamming down, and most people will take that as the same tell at the beginning. Now, there's a third version of this as well, so let me try and find that. Yeah, you'll see here that I dodge inwards and get past this attack, so it kind of requires a different response. The first one you have to dodge just normally, This one you can dodge inwards and usually get past it. So you'll see, boom, I dodge in and the shockwaves don't hit me. Right after this is mix-up number 3. So, instead of raising up and coming down, or raising up and dropping its little thing in the middle down, this time it kind of just hovers above the ground and does 1, 2, and then raises up for a third one. So you can see if you're attacking a leg and you're not really paying too much attention to this, you're just looking to see if it's raising up or down, how this can be really confusing at first. And for this one, it's an additionally different response. You need to do dodge, dodge, and then you gotta wait for the big slam and then dodge again, right? So it's 3 different responses for 3 different attacks, but I think these attacks are a little bit too similar in their animation. And I think part of that is just to do with this enemy in particular. Right, I've never had issues figuring out what the legs are doing, because that's typically what I'm hitting, and that's what I'm focused on. So if they do the leg raise, or if they do the one where they spin around, that's pretty easy to see, because they either lift up their leg, or their leg kind of spreads out, and you see it spread out, and you're like, oh, it's about to do the spin. Right, there are different animations. I'm just not sure they're different enough to be able to show the player exactly what it intends to do. And like I said, initially you're kind of primed to treat these all the same, because they all have the same blink at the beginning, the same blink at basically at the head of the machine. Right, they all have a blink up here, something like that, to indicate that they're about to do their attack. Right, that one is a blink right here. Right, they're all parry blinks at about the same level on this big thing, and I think players absolutely primed to think that these are the same attack. So when they come into a more challenging version of this boss, well, challenging in the sense that it has more HP and a higher stun meter, so you actually have to interact with the mechanics, you're going to be very confused with this at first, because these are different attacks. I don't think it's super clear that these are different attacks, and they all have different responses that you need to have. So that's number 3. This in particular was giving me some frustration. This may just be because this enemy is pretty large, and, you know, not every enemy is designed like this, so the ones that are smaller are much easier to keep track of and tell what you need to be doing. I just want them to be careful in the future if they're designing more like big creatures, to make sure that all the animations are clearly showing what they're about to do, and once you have seen them before, you know how to respond. Because I don't think raising up and dropping a little thing, and then sort of crouching in the same position are good enough tells to really let the player know what they need to be doing. You can never tell from this crouching thing that you need to be doing a dash dash and then a later other dash, right? You can never figure that out intuitively. Now, maybe you could dodge the normal one that just drops intuitively, right? It's raising up, oh, it's going to drop down on me, I'd need a dash. But I don't think the other 2 you could dodge intuitively. You're not going to know that the big one is going to send out a 3-hit shockwave, and if you dash outwards, you're going to get caught by that. That one's not unintuitive, but I wouldn't say that it's obvious that it's going to do that. And the last one, where it does the 1, 2, and then drop, that we were just talking about, that one is pretty much like, what the hell just happened? It crouched, and then it did 1 big hit, 2 big hits, with basically no animation wind-up, and then it's going to rise up and do another one. So yeah, I think this enemy in particular doesn't have the best telegraphing, and I hope in the future that the telegraphing is stronger than this, basically. So those have been 3 small issues that I've had with the combat playing this game. I still think this game has a pretty strong foundation as far as the combat goes, and if we get more challenging content, I think it will be pretty enjoyable. I had a pretty good time learning most of this guy's patterns to beat him even if I was underleveled. But I think, yeah, these are small things, but I think if they fix them, they would make combat more satisfying and just more fair on the player in general. So with that, that's going to be the end of this video. Let me know what you think. Do you have any issues yourself with the combat? Let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and take care.